welcome to Network Africa with me, Cynthia Are. Now, as Boko Haram steps up its attacks on neighboring countries around Nigeria, Niger's parliament has unanimously approved the deployment of troops to northern Nigeria as part of a regional offensive against the militant group. Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, Chad and Benin Republic agreed at the weekend to send a joint force of 8,700 troops to battle the militant group, which has killed thousands of people and kidnapped hundreds more in its bid to carve out a caliphate. In recent days, Niger has massed more than 3,000 troops in its southern region of Diffa on the border with Nigeria, awaiting parliamentary approval to go on the offensive. The vote was supported by all 102 deputies present. On Monday, Boko Haram militants bombed the Niger town of Diffa, killing 5 people, and that's its third attack there in 4 days. Now, still talking insurgency, suspected militants from the Boko Haram sect are believed to be responsible for hijacking a bus in northern Cameroon and abducting at least 20 people in the process. Militants reportedly seized a bus carrying market-goers and drove it toward the border with Nigeria. Some reports put the total number kidnapped in Cameroon as high as 30. The bus was seized near the border area of Koza and driven towards the Nigerian border, that's 18 kilometers away. In an apparently related incident, several Boko Haram fighters were killed and around 10 Cameroonian soldiers injured as the militants attacked Kerewa. A separate group of fighters reportedly attacked the nearby town of Kolofata, looting food and livestock. The sect appears to have escalated its attacks around Nigeria in recent weeks, targeting neighboring Cameroon and Niger. Now, we'll be speaking to security experts later on in the week, but now we're looking at other issues. It might be a new year, but old habits are still recurring. Yet another case of illegal migration in search of greener pastures has led to the demise of at least 25 migrants. The chief health official on the Italian island of Lampedusa confirmed the incident, saying he believed the victims might have died of hypothermia aboard Italian Coast Guard vessels after being picked up from an inflatable boat adrift near Libya. 2 Italian patrol boats picked up 105 migrants late on Sunday from the boat drifting in extreme sea conditions, with waves as high as 26 feet and temperatures just a few degrees above zero. The migrants then spent around 18 hours on the decks of the small patrol boats, taking them to Lampedusa, and buffeted by high winds and spray, and at least 25 people died en route of hypothermia. Now we'll be speaking to an immigration expert shortly, but until then we look at another issue of the economy as regards the African continent. Now, as African states line up to join the growing club of dollar bond issuers, economists and analysts warn of a slide back into indebtedness that could undo recent economic gains and create a Eurobond curse to match the distorting resource curse. According to a report released by the Overseas Development Institute, ODI, Ivory Coast would be most exposed, risking losses equivalent to some 11% of its GDP due to its high debt and long maturities.
The author of the report, Judith Tyson, says African nations face extra currency cost for their debt of nearly $11 billion.
The risk of default on government debt in sub-Saharan Africa is growing, and there are 2 main drivers of that. One is that many countries are borrowing simply too much relative to the size of their economies, but secondly, governments are also borrowing in US dollars. In the last year, many African currencies have depreciated very sharply against the dollar, and that means the value of that debt in local currencies has grown. We've calculated it's grown by over $10 billion in the last year.
Governments seeking to replace declining foreign aid and pay for infrastructure are also taking concessional funds from multilateral institutions, more expensive commercial bank loans and bilateral financing from lenders like China and Brazil. Foreign countries are in immediate danger of default and most are largely financing themselves domestically, but the debt buildup is worrying. According to the World Bank, some countries are more exposed after heavy issuance in 2014. Ghana's overall debt to GDP rate is 65% of GDP, while Senegal and Mozambique both have more than 50%. Already, a slowdown in export markets and a slump in commodity prices, particularly oil, have placed robust economic growth rates in jeopardy, undermining countries' ability to pay their debts.
We have been affected by moves in commodity prices, and so for some of the worst currencies affected, for example, have been the Nigerian naira, which at one point was 60% down, it's now 20% down. But we're also seeing some macroeconomic problems. So, for example, in Ghana, it's seen very sharp currency devaluations as well. That related much more to the fiscal deficit that they've run up, and in fact, they've had to ask the IMF for help.
Tyson also warns that capital inflows on the back of an Africa rising narrative could be another catalyst, with a massive surge of foreign funds pursuing the Africa growth story.
There's certainly been a huge boom in Africa. The Africa Rising story has been very popular with investors in the West, and we've seen a huge surge of capital into the region. It's one of the risk factors in terms of financial crisis when we see capital inflows and then outflows, and we're calling on investors to be more differentiated in their choices.
Based on the view of the ODI, a debt crisis isn't inevitable, but if it happens, homes could be lost in the US, Asian food shortages could occur, and the Eurozone's massive unemployment problem could experience the damage done by previous crises.
We'll take a quick break now on Network Africa. When we come back, we'll bring you an update concerning South Sudan. Please stay with us.
To know what's trending or you miss your favorite live shows, you can watch it all on our YouTube channel. Simply log on to www.youtube.com/channelsweb. Scroll down to your favorite program and click play. You can also view all uploaded videos by clicking on View All. Don't forget to subscribe and get the latest videos. If they are interesting, like them and be heard. Get connected with the channel's television YouTube page. The news at your fingertips.
Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television now. Just before the break, we did tell you about another case of illegal migration that resulted in the deaths of at least 25 people, and some reports say as much as 30 people lost their lives in the process. And for more on this, we're now being joined via Skype by the senior immigration lawyer for law and visas. That's Olumide Adeomi. Olumide, thank you so much for speaking with us on Network Africa.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, I'd like to start by asking you why the issue of illegal migration is still a challenge despite the obvious dangers linked to it.
Illegal migration will always be in existence, in human existence. It will always be a factor because there are so many factors that that concerns illegal migration, which is bad governance, imbalance in the share of wealth across the world. So you have some rich countries and you have some less off countries. So people, human beings, will always want to survive and would always want to migrate from one place to the other, basically looking for greener pastures. And then in the present state, in the present time, in the past 3 years or so, we've seen an increase in migration from North Africa to Europe. And that is as a result of the war in Syria, war in Iraq, and all that. So people migrate, they get into Libya, they get into countries like Tunisia, Morocco, and they go over the Mediterranean Sea.
Unfortunately, we've lost that call, but we will reconnect with him as soon as we can. But for now, we have to look at other stories, and the warring factions might have signed a power-sharing deal in order to end the crisis in South Sudan. But the world's newest country faces another challenge. A deteriorating humanitarian situation there has put 2.5 million malnourished people at risk, and they are in need of urgent help. The United Nations humanitarian chief, Valerie Amos, confirmed the situation last night, adding that aid workers Severe famine will threaten South Sudan in the next few months if forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and his rival Riek Machar continue to shell food distributions and loot aid.
Fighting erupted in December 2013 and has forced 2 million people to flee their homes. Up to 50,000 people have been killed. The fighting has hurt efforts to tackle South Sudan's chronic hunger problem. Clashes between rebels and government forces has wrecked food markets and forced people to abandon livestock and land.
The humanitarian situation in South Sudan continues to deteriorate. We have 2.5 million people now that are malnourished, and if we don't get to them urgently, their food security situation will worsen. It is now the dry season. It's the time when we have to pre-position, we have to get supplies to some of those very difficult places, because if we don't do it now, we will not be able to get to them during the rainy season.
Amos said the aid must be put in place before the rains arrive and that assistance will still be needed even if there is a political solution.
The search for a political solution is absolutely critical, but the reality is that even if there were a political solution tomorrow, the millions of people who have fled and who are in different parts of the country requiring food assistance, for example, healthcare, education for their children, would continue to need that assistance as we rebuilt the country and its infrastructure, and crucially, as we rebuilt the trust so that people felt safe enough to return home.
South Sudan has been in political turmoil since Kiir sacked Machar, triggering a conflict that reopened ethnic tensions in the world's youngest country. South Sudan became independent from Sudan in 2011. Fighting has curbed oil production, which is crucial for its economy.
Now, unfortunately, there's still tension in parts of Egypt, and just this morning, suspected Islamist militants bombed 3 police stations in the city of Alexandria, wounding 10 people, and also targeted 2 other locations. Thankfully, the Assistant Interior Minister for Alexandria confirmed that nobody was injured in the other 2 blasts in the eastern part of the city. Frequent small-scale attacks have hurt Egypt's efforts to project an image of stability after 4 years of turmoil triggered by the 2011 Arab Spring uprising. Egypt hosts an investment conference next month in the resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh in the southern Sinai Peninsula and hopes to attract funds to turn around an economy battered by instability. The Egyptian affiliate of Islamic State, the militant group controlling large parts of Syria and Iraq, has claimed responsibility for attacks on security forces in Sinai that killed at least 30 people late last month. Islamist militants in Sinai have stepped up attacks on police and soldiers since the army toppled President Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood back in 2013 after protests against his rule. Hundreds of police and soldiers have been killed, and the government says it's committed to democracy and faces a long battle against militancy. Now, thankfully, we've been able to reconnect with Olumide Adewumi, who is a senior immigration lawyer with Law and Visas. Thank you for staying on the line. Now, you were explaining about to us why illegal migration is still a challenge despite the obvious dangers. Please carry on.
Yes, yes. What I was saying is that the question was why is illegal immigration still a challenge despite obvious dangers? The thing is that there is global poverty, there is unequal distribution of wealth around the world, and there is global conflict. So these are the factors that fuel illegal migration. So people want to migrate from one place where there is trouble or poverty, and they want to move to another region where they can seek better life.